We're going to wrap things up today with the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch. And you'll have myself and Erick Elgin as your instructors for this last session. And we're looking forward to diving into plants with you. Erick, if you're on, you want to say hello real quick?
Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you at the end of the day. My name is Erick Elgin. I'm an aquatic ecologist with Michigan State University Extension and the CLMP Lake Program Manager.
Thanks, Erick. And then I'm Joe. I'm Joe Latimore. I am a faculty member at Michigan State University in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, and also serve as the director of the MiCorps program. All right. Plants are cool, and we're going to talk about them today. The first thing I wanted to talk about is just a little background on all the benefits that aquatic plants play in our lakes. And then we'll talk about the challenges that invasive plants can pose to our lake, and then talk about the actual procedures for monitoring for invasive plants in your lake through the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program. Aquatic plants are fish and wildlife habitat. We need them. Our lakes need them. They are what make a lake a diverse ecosystem. Without the plants, you don't have the animals. It's pretty much as simple as that. And so that's something that we sometimes forget. We forget that the frogs need that camouflage to live and thrive in our lakes. We might forget how important that plants are for the life cycles of our fishes, like this perch that relies on plant beds to hide in when it's small and to search for mates and so forth, and reproduction, and our larger fish, like this pike, that lurk around our plant beds as predators, waiting for smaller fishes to pass by where they can find food and so forth. And anyone who has ever gone fishing with and learned from someone who knew what they were talking about knows that fishing by plant beds is often the most productive place in the lake. So there's a reason for that. They're a really critical and important habitat. Aquatic plants also support water clarity and water quality, and they do that in a number of ways. Through their photosynthesis and respiration, they actually add oxygen into the water. Again, really important for fish and other creatures that live in the water. They reduce shoreline erosion by buffering the energy of waves and wind and ice, and absorbing that energy before it hits the shore and causes erosion. As a result, they also reduce sediment suspension. They prevent sediments from the lake bottom from being churned up as readily, and making your water murky and cloudy. And they also use up nutrients. Every lake has nutrients in it, things like phosphorus that plants and algae use to grow. And if you don't have plants, if plants are removed from a lake through weed management, herbicides, and so forth, the nutrients are still there in the lake, and something is going to grow as a result. And usually that's algae that makes our water turn green, can result in algae blooms and so forth. So removing the aquatic plants from a lake often leads to a green lake that people don't typically want. So that's something to keep in mind as well when considering plant management, or modifying the plant community in your lake. Of course, not all the plants we have in our lakes in Michigan belong there. Aquatic invasive plants are plants that are not native to Michigan's waters and have the potential to, or actually causing damage to the ecosystem, or to the economy, or to human health. That's the official state of Michigan definition of an invasive species. And so this is what we often see in situations where a plant becomes invasive. A non-native plant comes in. There's nothing there to keep it in check. Nothing's eating it. No diseases are causing it to, minimize, and it doesn't. None of the native plants can compete with it, and so it grows quickly and overtakes areas of the lake. And that's what we're trying to avoid by monitoring our lakes for invasive species so we can catch them early. Invasive plants can reduce the diversity in our lakes by crowding out the native plants, shading them in the case of plants like this European frogbit that create a thick layer on the surface of the water and make it almost pitch dark underneath. No other plant is going to live under there. It can also impact fisheries through um, not being the right habitat or structure for fish to nest in, that are looking for our native plant beds, are looking for clean areas of the lake to spawn and nest in. They can impact the fisheries, and they can also impact fishing, right? It's really hard to cast your bait out into an area of a lake that looks like this. Invasive plants can also really reduce property values. If the lake is choked with invasive plants in front of a property, it's going to be less interesting to a potential buyer, and it's going to be less enjoyable for the person who lives there. And once they can get established, they can be very expensive to control. Chemical control is often the approach that is used, especially for massive invasions, and that can cost anywhere between $200 and $2,000 per acre, or even more, depending on the approach that you choose to take. So they're expensive, they're problematic, and so by all means, prevention is the most inexpensive and practical approach. We know from research and also from experience that the most common way that a new invasive plant makes its way into a lake is through trailered boats. And so there's a lot of resources and education and even small grants out there to help educate boaters, to encourage them to keep their boats clean and to avoid inadvertently spreading invasive species. So we'll refer you to the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program that is hosted by MSU Extension. The Clean Boats, Clean Waters website offers a lot of great information about cleaning your boat, resources, signs, brochures, educational information. In addition, they host the Mobile Invasive Species Team, or MIST. That's our mobile boat wash program that hires students, college students every summer to travel around the state in partnership with lake associations and local communities to offer educational free boat wash events at lakes all around the state. And if that's something that interests you, we can connect you with the folks at Clean Boats, Clean Waters to potentially set up a free event at your lake. They also offer small grants to communities. There's a competitive application process every winter with small grants up to $3,000 available to communities to do education in their local areas about invasive species and how to prevent them. And, that's not the only way that invasive plants can move into our waters. Several of them that we see actually originated in the aquarium trade. Popular plants for keeping in aquariums that are ornamental or decorative. They may be put in people's home aquariums or in water gardens outside, water features. They may be beautiful, but they're not from Michigan. And if they get inadvertently lost through flooding or intentionally discarded in local lakes and streams, those plants can become invasive. And so our Ripple program, shown at the bottom of the slide there, offers resources to help prevent that from happening. So we can provide more information on either of those programs if you're interested. But no matter how hard we try, prevention is not guaranteed. There's always a chance that something will slip through. And the most recent kind of cautionary tale that we have for you is the invasion of hydrilla in Michigan. This was, as the top headline says, the aquatic plant we didn't want here. In Michigan, we've been kind of waiting for years and planning for the arrival of hydrilla. It has invaded waterways all over the US, including states around Michigan, but we had not yet been invaded until late in 2023, when this plant was discovered in two small private ponds in Southwest Michigan. And since that date, aggressive management action has been underway to eliminate that infestation. It has not been successful yet. We've had some success in knocking it back, but it has not been eliminated yet. And so this is a big effort, just, in a couple little tiny ponds, honestly, to try and make sure that this plant does not spread beyond that. It's a very aggressive plant that you're going to meet later, and we'll teach you how to recognize it. So the next line of defense is early detection to catch new invasions early, like we did with hydrilla in that pond. We caught it before it took over half the state or something like that, because it could have happened. These plants grow underwater, and if no one's looking, they can be pretty sneaky and spread quite aggressively without anyone noticing it, especially since a lot of these plants look kind of similar to plants that we do find regularly naturally in our lakes. So early detection, we want to maximize the potential for eradication. The sooner you can detect a plant invasion, the better. It's much easier to control an invasion like we see on the left-hand side of your screen with just a plant or two versus a situation that we see on the right where the plant has spread aggressively and will be much more difficult to control. So a good early detection program is going to focus on the most probable invaders. Those are the plants or species that you're most likely to find. Because there are literally hundreds of species that potentially could invade our lakes, but there's always a few that we know. Either they're nearby or have been reported elsewhere, or we know that they spread very quickly, and we want you to know those plants. And so our program focuses on 5 species. Our program also targets high-risk invasion areas for new invasions. And of course, those are the boat landings, but also some other areas that we'll show you in a minute that might be where you're most likely to find an invasive plant in your lake. And they also are most successful when the monitoring is more or less continuous. And using volunteers, engaging volunteers like you to conduct that monitoring really helps with that, because you're there, you're at your lake, you live nearby, you may live right on the lake. And so you're more likely to see something and be able to say something versus, me. I work for a university. I travel all around. I might visit a lake once during the year and then never go back again, or only go back every couple of years. And so the odds of me being the person to first find an invasive species in your lake is much lower than the chances that you would find it if you know what to look for. So the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch is Michigan's statewide monitoring program for early detection of invasive plants in our lakes. And so it's exciting that we're able to partner with our state agencies and other organizations around the state to train and empower volunteers to know what to look for and how to report them. So we're glad you're here to learn about it. So why get involved? We know that early detection and rapid response works. And so even if your lake has a known infestation, like some of the lakes in our program definitely have had, say, Eurasian water milfoil for decades. There's a lot of it. They know it's there. Why should they be in the watch? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of those is that there's always something else that could come in. If milfoil got in, other invasive plants could also get in. And so it's important to be looking for other things. And it's also valuable to help you kind of track the invasives that you already know are there. It helps you know where they are, how much there is. If you're actively managing them, it can help you track how successful the management is and so forth, and how close you're coming to your management goals. So this is a really valuable program to get involved with. And I would say even if your lake has a professional lake manager contracted to help with plant management, they do a good job. They're out there keeping an eye on your plants, but even they aren't there as much as you are to look for new things. And it also helps lake associations be more informed consumers of what their contractors are selling to them and doing for them. If you actually know what those plants look like, you'll know, yeah, you told me that you found Eurasian milfoil in my lake, and I agree, because I know what it looks like. I saw it myself. And so you can be better informed in working with the professionals that you are working with on your lake. So what's really important is to first know those invasive species. So as I said, there could be dozens of aquatic plants that you could be looking for. But to be a really effective program, we don't want to overwhelm with lots of species, especially ones that you're unlikely to actually have in your lake. So we focus on these 5 species: Eurasian water milfoil, curly leaf pondweed, starry stonewort, hydrilla, and European frogbit. And Erick's going to take you through all 5 of those in just a minute. But first, I want to share with you the resources that we have for you. On the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch page of our website, you'll find a description of the program, a fact sheet about why it's important, the protocol, and the data sheets. You'll find resources that will help you identify these plants with tips and tricks. You'll find the sampling protocol, and you'll find some good training videos as well. We have some new print resources as well. We have new identification cards that we provide a set to everybody who signs up for this program. And we had these identification cards printed in large quantities. And if this is something that you think your lake association would like to distribute broadly, we can send them out in packs of 100. And they have the invasive species on one side and a similar looking native species on the other side. Reach out to us if you're interested in that. We have those for free. The other new resource that we have is a field guide to aquatic invasive plants that we just recently got printed. It's a brand new book. It replaces, if you ever had the Boater's Guide to Invasive Plants that we did several years ago. It has a photo of a boat on the front. This is the replacement to that guide because the thing with invasive species is there's always something new. And so there was a lot of updates that were needed. So we got all new fresh illustrations and information that can help you determine and distinguish invasive plants from some of the more common native plants that we have in our lakes. So anyone who enrolls in this program gets also a copy of this. You can also download an electronic PDF version of it from our website, or you can purchase them online from MSU. I believe it's $10 a copy for purchase. All right, at this time, unless there's any questions to cover, Eric, I think I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Sorry, I was busy reading my new aquatic invasive plant book. No. All
It's a
right.
distraction, I know.
It Well, before we move on from this just transition slide, we can see in my hand here, these are some of the features that we're going to be looking at the tip of my thumb. You can see that there's this little white structure on a kind of clear-like thread, and that's some of the detail that we have to look for to help us distinguish between these species. Next slide, please. So as Joe mentioned, we are looking at 5 different species here in the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch. Just to give a little bit more context behind these 5, these first 3, Eurasian water milfoil, curlyleaf pondweed, and starry stonewort. These are considered our established aquatic invasive plants in the state of Michigan. They are abundant and widespread throughout the entire state, and that's what we consider established. And they've been here, all of these have been here for multiple decades. Curlyleaf is approaching, I think, 100 years in the state. And so we wanted to mention this because these are our common invasives, but also that sometimes there's a fear that there are many, many invasive plants in the state, but in fact, there's way more native species that we find in our water bodies. Next slide. And then the other 2, as Joe mentioned, we have hydrilla in the state for the first time. This is a very recent invader down in Berrien County, Southwest Michigan. And we're going to emphasize this a lot because it is a awful plant and we really do not want it anywhere else in the state. So it's only found in those 2 ponds in 1 location. And then European frogbit, it is well established in our Great Lakes coastal wetlands, like in Lake Erie, Lake St. Clair, up into the St. Mary's River in the UP, but we haven't necessarily seen it hop into many, many inland lakes in the state. We are starting to see it popcorn inland, but there aren't too many. And so maybe not quite established in our inland waters, but is definitely becoming close to that. Next slide. So let's dive in. Let's get to know our invasive species. So Eurasian water milfoil is our first up. And so as you can see, oh, I don't have my little pointer, but on the left, there's a water line, a gray water line up there. And we have that there because the vast majority of the plant is underwater. This is a submersed plant, and there is a bit of when it's time for flowering, it does send up that little flower spike there. very small, thin, but you can see it above. But the vast majority of the plant is underwater. So now when you approach this plant, it's underwater, you grab, you have it in your hand. The next thing you'll notice is that it has a very feathery leaf, as you can see in the red where it describes what a leaf is here. So in this cross section of a plant, we have four leaves. Joe is circling that there. And it looks very feather-like, fern-like, maybe like a Christmas tree that people will draw quickly. That is a leaf. So now here we are, we're a submersed plant, looks like feather-like leaves. Really what that means is you're holding on to one of our milfoils in the state. Eurasian milfoil is just one of many. I think, let's see, is there eight? I believe eight, six of them being native and two being invasive. And so now that you're holding on to a milfoil, you then will count the number of leaflets. And so as you can see, Joe is kind of highlighting that with the pointer there. So you count the leaflets on one side of that leaf. And if you are at 12 or more, you have Eurasian water milfoil if the leaves are whorled. Um, Thanks, Joe. Yes, so feather-like leaves, 12 or more leaflets on one side, and the leaves are whorled around the stem. A feature just to highlight, it's not found on all Eurasian milfoil plants, but they tend to have a lighter, pinker stem. Some of our natives have more of a darker green or darker brown, and some are very white, but Eurasian milfoil tends to be lighter and slightly pink. Next slide, please. So here's just a real life version of it. You can see that very feather-like structure. You count up on one side and it's easily over 12 leaflets. Next slide. I don't know if any of you have heard of hybrid milfoils. So what's happening here is our Eurasian milfoil has hybridized with our native northern water milfoil seen on the left. Very similar. By the way, northern milfoil, that picture on the left, what do you see that's different from the Eurasian milfoil on the right? Very similar, right? Right? Feather-like leaves, whorled leaf arrangement. But if you count the number of leaflets, you note that it is less than 12. And so usually it's at 10 or under. So if you see that, that is our northern native water milfoil. But these two have unfortunately hybridized and created many strains out there that can be quite aggressive or resist herbicide that is typically used for Eurasian water milfoil. And so we want to know if we have this in our lake, and unfortunately, it's very difficult to tell with our eyes. We can get close or make an assumption that it kind of is a mix of characteristics, like maybe it's 11 or 12 leaflets and they look just kind of funny. But to tell 100%, if you have some questioning if it is Eurasian water milfoil or not, or if it's a hybrid, you can send it to a lab at Montana State. There's a professor who has a service that you can send them samples and then they can genetically test it if it's a hybrid. So that's a handy service, and we can provide that information later. Next slide. And this is just to show, here are three of our more common native milfoils, and you can see they are very similar. But just keep in mind with Eurasian water milfoil is that they are feather-like leaves, always whorled around the stem, and have 12 or more leaflets on one side. If you keep that in mind, you can confidently identify Eurasian water milfoil from our common native milfoils. Next slide. So moving just away from the milfoils in the state is that there are some other common plants that are under the water that look very similar. So you can see in the center one where it says it's pointing at bladders there, that is an entire leaf. This whole structure is one leaf of our carnivorous submersed plant called the bladderworts. They're super awesome. They have these beautiful little flowers that are either yellow or purple, and they're great to have in lakes and pretty neat to see. But as you can see, this leaf doesn't quite look like a feather. There's a lot more branching happening in the leaflets. There's a lot of forking, branching. And if you see that, it is not Eurasian water milfoil. And just like if I look over to the next picture on the right, that is called coontail. As you can see, they are thin leaves. That's what the circle is. The circle there is circling around one leaf of coontail. But as you can see, it's not like a feather. It's more like a peace sign or a wishbone. So keep in mind, if you're looking at Eurasian water milfoil, it is a feather-like leaf. Next slide. Okay, I'll pause here. So for folks online, here's the quiz. Which plant is Eurasian water milfoil and why? I'll wait a moment for some answers to come in on the chat. Thank you, Lisa. Any other? Here we go. Yeah, folks are leaning in. That's right. It is B. Um, These are both milfoils, but what are we seeing here is more than 12. Thanks, Michelle. You beat me to it. That's great. So, yep, note Joe's circling that leaf, and it's maybe hard to count on the screen, but you can see there's quite a few. And when you look at that comparison on the left, you can see there's far less leaflets there. So good job, folks. Next slide. Moving on to our next species, curly leaf pondweed. So once again, we're looking at a plant that's mostly under the water. So it is submersed. It does send this little pencil type structure, flower structure above the water, but again, mostly below the water level. And so this belongs to a huge group of plants called the pondweeds. We have a pondweed family where there's 28 different species. So how can we tell this one from those? So it's under the water, and you look at they're very kind of strap-like leaves. They're very ribbon-like that are 2 to 3 inches long, quarter to 3/8 inches wide. Then, if you look at the leaf, you note that there's this really prominent midvein. You can hold it up to the sky and really see that midvein there. Different color, usually brownish inside of the leaf. And then you look at the leaf arrangement. So Eurasian milfoil was whorled. Well, this one is what's called alternate leaf arrangement. See how there's the leaf going off on the bottom right there? The next leaf above is on the other side, the alternate side of the stem. And then as it goes up, we see that. So alternate leaf arrangement. And now there's one key thing that's on here is you look at the side of the leaf. Look at those distinct teeth. That is called a serrated leaf margin or edge. And so when you see those teeth, that is the tall till sign. And teeth will be found up and down the side of the leaf. That is the sign of curly leaf pondweed. So we have this submersed plant, ribbon-like leaves, prominent midvein. We have alternate leaf arrangement on the stem, and we have those prominent teeth. Another thing to note here, and maybe I think the next slide is really good on it. Joe, next slide, please. So here's a real life image, but what you can see here is the leaves look like lasagna noodles. There's kind of a ripple, a pretty tight ripple on both sides of the edge of the leaf with those teeth and that prominent midvein. But the plant, when it's young, can have very flat leaves, but once it's mature, it is very ripply. It's very lasagna-like, and not many plants. Some plants have a wave, but not that really tight ripple that we see in our lasagna noodles. Next slide. So here are some examples. We have 2 pondweeds here, and then 1 pondweed look-alike. And as you can see, they look pretty similar. But on the left-hand side, there's a lot of branching happening here. Curly pondweed doesn't typically branch as heavily. And then if we could zoom in a little bit closer, if you could hold this in your hand, you'd see that there's no teeth at all. Instead, it's a very smooth, flat leaf edge. In the center, we see those kind of waves that you can see, but not quite lasagna noodle-esque. But again, once we zoom in, because that could fool us, once we zoom in, we don't see any teeth at all. And then on the right, this is not a pondweed. This is called water stargrass. And water stargrass doesn't have teeth, and it doesn't have a prominent midvein either. And so it's missing a couple things. And I should mention just for help, on the left, that is variable leaf pondweed, a native pondweed found all over the state. The one in the center is white stem pondweed, one of our bigger pondweeds that clasp the leaves, clasp the stem, and then, as I mentioned, water star grass on the right. Next slide. Okay, quiz. Which plant is curlyleaf pondweed and why? How are folks feeling about that? I see two B's. And Lisa Michelle, you're right on. Um, yep, serrated edge. That's right. So as you can see on the left on A, we have a plant with ribbon-like leaves. And it's hard to see if there's a midvein on these pictures, but you can see very alternate leaf arrangement. But when you zoom in, it's kind of more of like gunk on the side of the leaves, not teeth like you see on the right-hand side, where we have a zoomed in portion of the leaf, very lasagna-like and Ripley-like lasagna. Next slide. All right, so one of our tougher plants to identify is starry stonewort. So starry stonewort is not a flowering plant, but instead it's an algae. It's just a very big algae. We call it macroalgae, and it belongs to a macroalgae family called the stoneworts. And so we have a ton of native stoneworts. Um, but this is our one known invasive macroalgae, starry stonewort. It gets its name from on the right-hand side, the square going around that, weird-looking star structure. That is a bulbil. That is the only aquatic macroalgae in Michigan that has that very star-shaped structure. And so what you find is near the base of the plant, you can, if you pull it up on an anchor, pull it up on your rake or hand, you'll see these, it looks like fishing line, and that's called a rhizoid. And on that rhizoid, on that fishing line, you'll see these little star bulbils. And it's very star, and they're not squishy, they're hard. Like you can crush them and they'll like shatter and break in your fingertips. So that is a tall tale sign you have starry stonewort. But what else can you use to help with the identification is that you have this very kind of it, it it often's growing in thick patches. If you're able to grab a plant, there's these branchlets that are coming off in whorls off of the stem, and they're round in cross section. If you can squeeze it, and oftentimes they pop. They feel like they're breaking apart. And you can even take a huge mass of it and crush it down into like the size of a softball because all of these cells are easily broken by us. Also, if you look towards the tip of a branchlet, and there's with the cursor there, you can see that it kind of is a weird looking peace sign. You have a lengthy one followed by an uneven smaller one. And so that's a good sign that you're looking at starry stonewort as well, because we have some native ones that I'll be showing you here in a moment called Nitella, and those have they have wishbones at the end, but they're equal in length. Next slide, please. And here's an example. On the left is a singular plant showing that uneven branching that occurs. On the bottom right is a picture of a bulbil, and you can see the size. Look at the fingertip that we've taken a picture of there. So that's a bulbil and that fishing line rhizoid there. But oftentimes you're not looking at singular things. Instead, you're bringing up on a rake that Joe's about to show for the plant watch, and it kind of comes up in this mass like we have in the top right. And you can see those bulbils clearly on the plants. Next slide. So just some lookalikes to show for starry stonewort is our awesome native musk grass. So musk grass, also known as Chara, Chara. This plant does a lot for us. Joe mentioned how awesome aquatic plants are and how important they are for our aquatic ecosystems. Well, this is one of the groups of species that rise up to the top. They really do a lot to outcompete algae and therefore clear our water and provide wonderful structured habitat. So this muskgrass, the muskgrass comes because some of the species of Chara smell really lake. Like it reminds me of July in the summer swimming in a lake because it has a very pungent smell. This one is a much shorter branching. It doesn't have as long of branchlets, and there's no star-shaped bulbil. There can be some rhizoids, but their bulbils that are on there are completely circular and a sphere. Also, often they can feel kind of rough, and they don't pop in your finger like starry stonewort does. Next slide. And then there's the Nitella. The Nitella, we put this in here because there's a few different species around the state, and they can cohabitate with starry stonewort. But what you'll see is no star-shaped bulbil, but they do have this a smooth stem and can be quite long branching. But when you look at the tip of Nitella, instead of it being uneven, they are even in length at the tip of the branch. And that is your sign that you're looking at a Nitella, which is pretty neat and cool. Next slide. Okay, so here's the quiz again. What do you all think? Which is starry stonewort, A or B? And feel free to highlight whatever you want on why or why not for B. I see some folks coming in with A. That's right. That starry bulbil on the bottom left. Seeing that now on the right-hand side on the bottom right picture, you can kind of see these little orbs down there. Those orbs, those are the bulbils of a native Chara. And so, yep, and I see some uneven branching. That's nice. Good look on that because that's tough to see up on those. But yep, nice find with those uneven. And on the Chara that we're showing on B, they are not even branching. It's just the one branchlet coming off. They don't split at all. All right, good job, everybody. I hope your confidence is building as we go through this together. Next slide. Oh, I kept the hands-on identification. That's the wrong title, but I wanted to show this just side by side. There's starry stonewort on the left-hand picture, but then as we go to the right, we have different Chara species, different muskgrass, just to show kind of what it would mean by that broader reach that starry stonewort has compared to many of our native Chara. Next slide. Okay, jumping in to continue our species, we're going into hydrilla. As you can see on the picture on the illustration on the right, this is again all mostly below the water except for the flower, which is this little white flower that sits above the surface. But most of the plant is either below the surface or matting right at the surface. This plant looks very similar to our native Elodea, and I'm going to show you some of that later. But how can you identify hydrilla? What you find is a plant that's totally under the water or mostly under the water, and you see that there's these simple leaves all coming out of the stem in whorls. And on the far right, you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves all coming around the stem, which is called a leaf node, and 5 of them are coming out. If you see a plant under the water with 4 or more, 4 to 8 leaves coming out of a whorl, you take a closer look. And this is what you're going to now look for. Are there teeth on the sides of the leaf? So with your naked eye, can you see teeth along the leaf? So if you have whorls of 4 to 8 and you have a serrated leaf edge, you are likely holding on to hydrilla. And if that's the case, if you take a picture, note where you're located and reach out to Joe and I and/or Eagle, and we will all be very interested to confirm the identification and then respond accordingly. But what we're looking at again is whorls 4 to 8, serrated leaf edge. On some hydrilla, they get so kind of like robust is that even on the bottom side of the leaf, you can have a tooth coming out of the midvein, which makes it very rough looking. Next slide. So here's our example of hydrilla is on the left, and on the right is our native Elodea. What do you see as the main difference or differences between the two? What you can see is Elodea mostly has 3 leaves per whorl, and with your naked eye, you can't see the teeth. If you used a magnifying glass, you could see teeth, but without magnification, it looks smooth. But again, Elodea mostly has 3. Sometimes it will have 2, sometimes 4, but mostly 3. Hydrilla is going to have 4 or more, almost always. And so that's a very helpful indicator. Next slide. To emphasize our point, Elodea is found up and down and across Michigan. And so this is not hydrilla. This is our native waterweed, Elodea. You can see the 3 leaves per whorl. This is a great way to show a whorl is to cut a stem and show off one of the nodes. And so you can see some nice smooth leaves there. Next slide. Which plant is hydrilla? A or B? It's a very toothy plant over there on B, isn't it? But are the teeth right? Are the leaf arrangement right? That's right, I see, yep, so 5 leaves around a whorl, serrated edges. Good job. A is hydrilla. On the right is a plant that we haven't covered at all. It is a naiad, and as you can see, there's even teeth on the stem. Hydrilla does not have teeth on the stem. Also, the leaf arrangement is not quite whorled. It actually can be kind of, we call this plant having fireworks sort of leaf arrangement because it's a little more different and bunchy, but not quite like the whorls that we see in hydrilla. Good job, folks. Next slide. And so now finishing up our 5th plant, European frogbit. We wanted to show a map of this because as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, this plant has built up a lot on the coastal wetlands of the Great Lakes. And this is because this is a free-floating plant and it gets pushed into our shallow areas, into our emergent plants, into our wetlands by wind because it's drifting with the currents of the lake. And so this plant was first discovered in Michigan in the 1990s and has since started to popcorn inland. Reed's Lake in 2016, I think, was the most western known location in North America. And now, just a handful of years ago, was found in Green Bay, and that is now the most western edge. Oh, and Reed's Lake was in Grand Rapids, in case I didn't mention that. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, this plant is free floating. It's no longer a plant that's just below the water surface. Almost the entire plant is above the water. They look like little mini white water lilies. They have that classic circular look. But the thing is, they don't get very big. And so these leaves are only 2 to 3 inches max. Joe and I were just recently out on a lake and found European frogbit, and the leaf size was almost like the size of a penny or a nickel. But then they grow up to be around 2 to 3 inches. If anyone has tried to pull up a water lily, you can see that like or you can feel that it's rooted into the sediment. Well, European frogbit is not. It might be in shallow water, lightly rooted, but you can just pull it right on out. But mostly the roots are just dangling below. And all of the leaves come down to one central location called a basal rosette. Next slide, please. This plant sends out runners, kind of like strawberries. And so a runner goes out from a plant and then a new plant, basal plant, comes on out. And so you can get these really thick patches that occur that look like this. Next slide. Just to get scale here. So here it is. We have cattails in the background. So here's a wetland. The European frogbit is growing happily right on the edge there. And you can see just the difference in the water lilies in the foreground compared to the frogbit in the back. Very different size there. Next slide. So here's the quiz, our last quiz of the day. Which plant is European frogbit? A or B? Yes, and D Shields, thank you for that. Smaller leaves. That's the big one there. If you look at B, that's our white water lily. That if you look on the having the scale bar on the right, we can see that it's many inches, where European frogwood only gets to 2 to 3 inches big. So B just cannot be European frogwood. And yeah, I see a little flower. I didn't mention the flower because it doesn't flower all the time, but when you see this little white three-petaled flower with some yellow interior there, tall till sign, especially if it's associated with floating leaves like this, is European frogbit. And yes, on our whitewater lily, those flowers are awesome, right? They're robust, they smell great, they're huge. So next slide. Um, so those are our 5 species. Again, I hope that this slide deck has helped, this presentation has helped gain some confidence. Joe has mentioned some great resources out there that we provide and that you can dig into further. We wanted to leave this part of our presentation with the Michigan watch list species. So there are other species that have been determined to be um, a high risk, like they could invade here, and if they do invade here, it would be awful. They may not be here yet, or if they are here, they are not widespread at all. They're very specific to specific locations. Well, those are called our watch list species, and the state of Michigan has determined this list. And if you go into our new book, you can, or go to the Eagle website for aquatic invasive plants, you can find this list if you want to learn more about them. But the big thing here is if you find um, while you're doing the plant watch, while you're doing Secchi readings, while you're enjoying your lake, if you see a plant that's like, hey, I don't know what that is, and I've never really seen it before, it looks a little strange or different, take a picture and send it to us, and we can help with that identification so that we can hopefully get to this. If it is truly one of these watch list species, we can work at eradicating it before it's a problem. Next slide. Okay, well, thank you all for that. That was a lot of fun. I wish we could all be in the same room and go through this together. But now we're moving on to our next bit of the slide deck where Joe will talk about how we actually find these species.
Yeah, everybody did a really good job identifying the plants, even though you only had slides to look at and not the actual plants in your
Yeah,
hand. We got a couple comments on how good the visuals are, and I would agree, partly because at least those illustrations, Eric and I and some other folks on our team had a great time working with a scientific illustrator, an artist who developed those illustrations that are in our slides, they're on our cards in our book. His name is Bruce Kerr, and he was wonderful to work with,
very much
developing
so.
these diagrams and images that really show what these plants look like and their features. So it was really fun to work with him, and we're glad to be able to share those with you. We also had a question from April where she pointed out that the visuals and examples are very helpful, and she asked if there are any plant identification apps that are particularly good at helping ID the invasive water plants in the Great Lakes region. Eric, did you want to comment on that?
I'll start it, and Joe, you can fill it in too. There are a lot of great apps that are out there now. People who use iNaturalist and other places, Seek, and all these different things that are certainly handy. What we have found with aquatic plants is that they're not the best yet. And what often might happen is that we've seen in the past that they might identify one of our native pondweeds, for example, as curly-leaf pondweed. So in which, we want to make sure we don't misidentify our invasive species because this causes management actions for the future. And so they can be handy to use, still a tool. Just make sure that you use some of what you've learned today in our materials to confirm, especially if it says, yep, this is starry stonewort. Well, make sure to look for those characters that you know are required to make it starry stonewort. And if it's not there, be hesitant to just, I'll say, blindly use the app.
That's exactly what I would say. Some of these apps, they just, not nearly as many people are out photographing aquatic plants as they are butterflies and birds and wildflowers and things like that. So those apps have gotten really good at identifying those more kind of popular plants and animals, but they're not as good with as on aquatics. So, yeah, your advice is spot on about, you can use them, but also use your own judgment and what you've learned.
All
All
right.
right, I think it's time then to dive into the actual protocol. What we're all excited to learn about is how to map and find the exotic aquatic plants in your lake, if you have any. All right, so if you sign up, we provide you with copies of this paperwork. It's also available on the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch page on our website. There is, of course, a data form for recording your observations. There's instructions for building a sampling rake, which I'll show you in a moment. There's a link to the field guide book. There is also a plant photography card you can print and laminate. If you sign up, we will send you one already laminated, and I'll show you that in a moment as well. And then we also provide you with brochures and fact sheets about the value of this program and why it is so critical that we get as many lakes as possible involved in the program. This is what you're responsible for. It looks like a lot, but it's not. It's, your basic boating equipment, safety equipment, any other plant identification guides that you like to use. Have a depth map of your lake so you know where to go and where to find different depth areas in your lake. A GPS unit or your phone set to display coordinates can be useful to record where you find things, but you can also just mark that on a map if that's easier. A camera to photograph invasive plants because you do need to submit photos of your invasive plants that you find. We don't require you to collect samples for us, but you do have to send us pictures. A weighted line can help you check the depth where you are if you want to do that. The sampling rake itself, which I'll show you in a minute. Ziploc bags are really helpful because if you find a plant and you're not sure what it is, you want to bring it up to shore or you want to keep it to take photos or show it to others, have some Ziplocs and a marker to label them. Trash bags, of course, you'll want to dispose of any invasive plants that you pull up on your sampling rake or see and retrieve from the lake. A clipboard to hold all your forms and procedures, and of course, a waterproof writing instrument. Here's the rake. This is the tool of the trade. Eric and I have our favorites that we've used through the years and built and so forth. And, it's the same thing that we encourage you to use. So this is something you'll need to build for yourself. And it's pretty straightforward to do. You need to start with two garden rakes that you cut the handles off of. And then you attach them back to back. Those C-bolts that we show in the image work really well, and a hose clamp can help reinforce it in the center. And then you'll want to screw an eye bolt into one of the handles into the wood that remains there so you can attach a rope. We recommend, depending on the depth of your lake, usually 25 feet, 25 feet of rope should be sufficient. But if you're on a deep, clear lake, plants may grow much deeper than that. And so you may want to add additional length of rope. And so this is it. One piece of advice I would give you, if you don't have a couple old rakes laying around, if you think you maybe go buy a couple cheap rakes to do this with, don't get the absolute cheapest rakes because what we have found is that on those rakes, the wood doesn't go down into the handle. This part might just end up being hollow, and then you won't have anything to attach your eye bolt to. So kind of a mid-grade rake or any old rake, antique rakes and stuff, they tend to be built a little better than some of the cheap rakes you might find today. So that's just a little tip for you if you're going to build your own rake. When to do it? Obviously, you want to have plenty of plants to sample. So mid-June to August is kind of our rule of thumb. You might want to wait a little longer into summer if you're in the UP, just because you want the plants to be grown to a point that you'll actually be able to identify them and capture them. So mid-June to August are the best times to do this in general. And so, you don't have to do it all in one day. You can sample throughout the summer. One thing to keep in mind is that curly leaf pondweed that you learned about not too long ago is early grower. It tends to grow very early, downstate by Memorial Day. It'll be doing just fine. It's probably sprouting already. That's one of its approaches to getting a jump start against the native plants. And so if you waited till the end of August and then went looking for curly leaf pondweed, even if you had it, you might not find it. So that's something to keep in mind with your planning. You could go out early in the summer and then do another survey later on. And I'm also happy to see that Chelsea put in the chat. We do have a video on our MiCorps YouTube channel that we should promote more that shows how to make a rake. She's made plenty of these in her role in our program. So thanks, Chelsea, for sharing that in the chat. Lots of good stuff on our YouTube channel to check out. All right, where to sample before you even go out. You've heard this from me before on other parameters, but get out your lake map and take a look at it and think about your lake and some of the features on the lake. There are places in your lake where aquatic invasive species are most likely to be introduced, and also places where plants like to grow. So boat ramps, of course, are a place where introductions are likely to happen. Somebody didn't know that they got some milfoil tangled on their trailer when they were leaving the last lake they were at, and then they come to visit your lake, may inadvertently drop pieces of milfoil into your lake. So boat ramps are a great place to look. Also, public beaches and parks. These may be places where people bring in kayaks or paddle boards. They don't really need a trailer to launch those, so a park is another place to do that. And they may also be transporting invasive species. This may also be if someone, well-meaning decides to let their goldfish roam free, they may take their aquarium down to the beach or to the park and release it into the lake. And there may be, not only are goldfish not native to our lakes, if there's live plants in that tank, they may also be introduced to your lake there. So beaches, parks, also inlets and creeks, things that flow into your lake. If there are water bodies upstream of your lake that have invasive species, they may be carried downstream into your lake. And also, we mentioned look where plants like to grow, like quiet bays, coves, shallow areas where oh, it's always really weedy down there in the south end of the lake. Well, look there because that is a possibility that it's a really good habitat for invasive plants as well. Remember that even if you can't get all over your lake, even some data is really useful. If all you can sample is around your boat launch this summer, we still want that data. We still want you to sign up. We still want you to do this because it's important data. It's useful to know that somebody looked, even if they only looked, if you only went to the boat launch and surveyed here, that's great. But if you can do other high risk areas, like here's an inlet, here's another boat ramp, here's an inlet and another one here, that's great too. And if you have even more time, you can fill in the gaps. There's no high risk area you identified along this North Shore here between that inlet and that boat launch, but you could still sample there, of course, if you have the time. Now, how should you sample? How do you look for these plants? This is the ideal way. So we suggest, here's a boat launch. So you've identified this area as a high risk area. And what you can do is imagine an imaginary line. We'll call it a transect that goes from shore out into the water. And having that in mind, you could go out in your boat and you could toss your rake into the lake and drag it along the bottom in the shallow water, and then maybe in the mid depths, and then out in the deeper water. It's helpful to sample with your rake at different depths because different plants like different depths. Frogbit, it floats on the surface. Eurasian milfoil will be in kind of the mid depths typically, maybe going out into the deep water. I've seen starry stonewort in very shallow water and in very deep water. So it's important to, try a few different depths. Those are different habitat characteristics for those plants. And so you may find different things at the different depths. You can just toss the rake out over the side of the boat. You don't need to throw your shoulder out. Just give it a nice underhand, gentle toss over the side of your boat. Let it sink down to the bottom till it gets down to where the plants are rooted, and then pull it up by its rope, drag it up, and then look at what you've caught. And you can toss as many times as you want at any depth. It's not necessary to go crazy with it. Even one toss at any particular point may yield useful information. But typically, in general, 1 to 2 tosses at each depth along the transect is great. And as I mentioned, it's great to have a trash bag on board if you happen to get invasive plants and not throw them back into the lake. You can also dispose of any native plants you find that way. It's not as problematic, though, if you do want to just toss them back in the lake. If you just pull out some native pond weeds or something like that and want to just toss them back, that's okay. You don't have to collect all of those and dispose of them in the trash. In addition to the rake tossing, we also recommend what we call this very high-tech sounding name of the visual meander. And all we're saying there is look around the shoreline. This is great for finding floating leaf plants like European frogbit. You can imagine that a plant that's just floating along on the surface and not rooted to the bottom, the rake might not be the best way to do it. So when you're on your boat, just kind of visually scan and meander your eyes around in the shallows. European frogbit will get blown up into whatever way the wind's blowing, and it'll usually end up against the plants, like that image that Eric showed you earlier. So adding that visual inspection to the rake toss will put you in good shape for finding plants. I love this illustration done by the same artist who did our individual plant diagrams that shows, this happy team of volunteers having the time of their lives out doing the exotic plant watch. They've tossed their rake into the lake, dragging it along the bottom, and are excited to see what they find. And hopefully, it's all native plants. And here's how you'll document what you find. This is page 1 of the data sheet. You've seen many that look a lot like this earlier today if you were in our earlier sessions, but you can see the information, lake name and county and township, your field ID number that we assigned to your lake, the names of the volunteers that were involved, the dates of the survey. Again, we mentioned before, you don't have to do this all on one day. You can attack it throughout the summer if you want. Just give us the dates that you were out there. Time is less important. And make any comments that you want about things that might have impacted what you found. It's really important to know if there's been any chemical treatments of invasive plants in your lake, because that can really impact what you find. If it's an effective treatment, you might not find much. So it's, of course, better to survey your lake before treatments happen or well after they happen, but sometimes that can't be controlled. You have a day that's scheduled that the volunteers are available, and you may not be able to plan it that way. So let us know any unusual conditions or recent weed treatments. Really helpful. On the bottom half of page 1, here's where you tell us what you found, just in general. If you don't find any exotic aquatic plants, just check that box and then use page 2, which I'll show you in a minute, to document the locations that you surveyed. If you do find invasive plants, here's all 5 of them. Just check the box to let us know which ones you found. If you want to know other species you saw, besides the 5 focus species, you can, of course, put them under other. And then when you submit a copy of your report to us, you want this page and page 2, which I'll show you in a minute, a lake map that shows us with numbers, the locations that you went, your transects and sites, and any photographs you took of your invasive plants. Remember, you have to send us photos of any invasives that you found. Now, here's an important reminder for you. Again, if you don't find any, we still want your report. Check that box and submit your report along with the map showing where you sampled, because not finding invasive species is still important data, and we want to have that record, and you want that record, right? You want to know in 2026, we surveyed these 8 spots, no invasive plants were found. That's really valuable, because if you find something next year, you can say, wow, this is new. We went out last year. We're pretty sure it wasn't there last year. So that might mean it's an early detection, and management and even eradication may be possible. So that's page 1. And here's page 2. It's just a 2-page data form. This is on the back. And here's where you list where you looked and what you found. So here we have, you start with your first one, site or transect number 1. This person had a GPS unit, so they wrote down what their coordinates were. But if you don't have that, you can describe with landmarks where you were. Write down the names of what invasive plants you found. Here they found CLP. They use it as an abbreviation for curly leaf pondweed. EWM can be Eurasian water milfoil. Did you take any photos? Yes or no? Here they took 2 photos because there was 2 plants, so that's great. And they made a note that the plant life there was sparse. And that's useful too, because that way you know if you were just someone reading the report, you know, okay, it wasn't a thick bed of these invasive plants, but there were a couple of them there, and that's interesting. And then site 2, they went to, new location, they didn't find any, they didn't take any pictures. And you just carry on like that for all the sites that you go to. Pictures. Again, they're required. You have to at minimum send us 1 representative photo of each invasive species you find in your lake. You don't have to send us 100 photos of Eurasian water milfoil. If you have a good one like this, that shows, yep, that's evidence that you found Eurasian milfoil. And this is a really good photo because, see, it includes a whorl that shows the leaflets, and anybody could count those and confirm that you ID'd this correctly. A wad of plants in a knot on this white sheet is not going to be helpful, because someone would look at that and say, I don't know, that might be Eurasian water milfoil, or it might be something totally different. So make sure your pictures show the features that one would want to see to confirm. And good photos are great for in the middle of your process too. If you hit something and you're just not sure what it is, take good photos of it and send it to us. We're happy to look at your photos and let you know what you're looking at. And of course, the better photos, the more likely we'll be able to give you a definitive answer on what you're looking at. You also want to make sure you label your photos. In this example, it just has written on it the name of the plant. You could also put the site number, site 2. You could write right on. And this is one of the cool features of this laminated photo sheet that we provide to you, is that you can write on it with a dry erase marker while you're out on the boat, then wipe it off and use it again. So that's really nice. So we hope you take advantage of it. This card we give you, these are some examples of some photos that volunteers, real volunteer photos that have done Exotic Plant Watch before. You can see curly leaf pondweed on the left. On the right, they found native Elodea, the look-alike to Hydrilla. So they wanted to send us a photo of that to show, oh, we found the similar plant, but we didn't find Hydrilla. And that is also a good practice. We welcome photos of native plants too that you want to send along. If you forget your laminated photo guide, even having your hand in the photo will help. It provides kind of a solid background to the photo and also provides some scale. In addition to that data sheet, the 2-page data sheet, we also want a map. And you want a map, right? You want to have a map for your records that shows where you went and sampled. So you can just make a copy of a map from a book and write on it where your sites are, as this volunteer did. Or you can be more fancy if you like using Google Maps or other mapping software. This is, again, a real report from a volunteer we received a few years back on Stony Lake in Oceana County, where the volunteer marked on Google Maps each of her sampling sites, and then in the legend wrote in curly leaf pondweed lots June 25th, for example. So that was really nice and helpful to receive too. But you don't have to go high tech if that's not your jam. Submitting your data. All right. Some of this will sound repetitive to our other parameters, but it's important to make copies of your data for all your records and enter your data at our website by October 31st. Send a copy of your complete report to us. You can send it in the mail, or you can email it to us at micorps@msu.edu. Those instructions are right there on the data sheet. As we wrap up here, it's really an important thing for some of these parameters, and Exotic Plant Watch is one of them. Teamwork, again, makes the dream work. We actually did a little study on this, and we talked to, a few years ago, volunteers that had enrolled in the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch through the years. And the ones that were successful and actually went out and did it and submitted results almost every time did not do it alone. They had people helping them. They got a team of folks out there with them, made a day of it or a couple days. They were all really curious to know if they had invasive plants in their lake or what might be going on, to learn the plants. And so we found that, and we even published a research paper on it, that volunteer teams are more likely to complete sampling, submit the data, and continue in the program the next year. And so this photo is a great illustration of this. These are volunteers from Oneida Lake in Livingston County. They submitted their report to us. We were going through it. There's all the photos of all the plants they found, and then we're flipping through, and all of a sudden this photo of happy faces, they included that in their report too, just to show that there's their team out enjoying a day on the lake and collecting some important data at the same time. How can we help you also be successful? In addition to encouraging teamwork, we do have some funding in our budget to do some field visits to some lakes that are enrolled in the Exotic Plant Watch. It's particularly helpful because we can help you kick off your survey effort. We can assist you with plant identification. We can go out on the water with you or sit around your dining room table if you wish, however you want to do it. Do both. Answer questions and get your feedback about the parameter and the CLMP. We will arrange these visits very soon with lakes that have enrolled in the program. But keep in mind, not all lakes can be visited. We visit maybe 5 to 7 every year, and new lakes in the program are definitely our top priority. Because we want to get you off to a good start. So if this is something that interests you, especially if you're a new lake, reach out to us, but we'll be looking at all the enrolled lakes and also reaching out to volunteers on those lakes to see if you're interested in having a visit from one of us. An additional support, I don't know if anyone is on live right now from the Upper Peninsula, but if you are, or someone watches this recording, in 2026, this year, we have a partnership with the Michigan DNR. They really want to see more lakes in the UP doing the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch. So if for lakes in the UP, if you haven't done this before, the DNR will cover your cost of enrolling in the program. It's that $30 enrollment fee. The DNR will cover that, and they will send you a supply kit that includes a rake ready to go, sampling trays, and other materials so that you can just hit the ground running and get out there and do it. And so we're really happy to have this partnership with the DNR this year only. To get more involvement in the UP. And this is strategic. You know, a lot of our invasive species, our plants, the ones we talked about today, have started their invasions in the lower peninsula. But over time, by the movement of boats and other things, upper peninsula lakes start to get invaded too. And so they are perfectly suited for early detection monitoring like the Plant Watch. So reach out to us if you're in the UP and want to get involved and take advantage of this additional support. And then I'll wrap up once again by mentioning if you're really interested in invasive species, we'd love to have you join us on our Aquatic Invasive Species Detection Blitz that starts June 29th and runs for 2 weeks. Again, go to the MiCorps.net website. There's a link to it right on our homepage, or you can look under events or just go straight to this URL, MiCorps.net/events/AIS Blitz. We're going to be using the iNaturalist app to identify invasive plants and animals all over Michigan, and you don't even have to be enrolled in MiCorps to do it. Anyone can do it. There's no fees. There's no enrollment required. Just sign up at the link and you'll get the updates, and any observations you make during the Blitz period will be included in our project. And Chelsea even put a clickable link there in the chat for those who are interested.